bringing him in. Sorry about this. Sorry. Seems like a really great guy.
The story begins with a man who has absolutely nothing left to lose. No job, no home, barely any relationship with his own daughter. And somehow, within a few weeks, this same man is going to shrink to the size of an insect, ride on the back of a flying ant, and go head-to-head with a killer wearing a suit built from stolen science. This is the story of Ant-Man. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand why being tiny turned out to be his greatest strength. Our main character is Scott Lang, and we meet him walking out of prison after finishing a 3-year sentence. He's not some hardened criminal. He broke into his old company and returned money they had secretly been stealing from customers. In his mind, that was justice. To the outside world, it just makes him a felon. His old cellmate is waiting for him, ready to pull him straight back into the criminal life. Scott says no. He's done. He wants to go straight, and more than anything, he wants to be part of his young daughter's life again. But the world doesn't make that easy for a man with a record. Scott lands a job at a fast food place, tries to keep his head down, and genuinely attempts to build something honest. It doesn't last. The moment his employer finds out about his past, he's fired on the spot. This part of the story matters because it shows us exactly who Scott is underneath everything. He's not chasing money or power. He's a father desperate to prove he can be trusted again, and every single door society offers him keeps slamming shut. His ex-wife has moved on with a new partner, a police officer, and their relationship with Scott is civil but strained. He's allowed to see his daughter, but only under strict conditions, and missing a child support payment could take that away entirely. The pressure on him is enormous, and it's entirely emotional, not criminal. With legitimate options running out, Scott's old cellmate makes one more offer. There's a big job lined up, breaking into what looks like a wealthy old man's house. Scott resists at first, but the desperation to provide for his daughter eventually wins out, and he agrees to one last job. Before we get to that job, it's worth pointing out how the film introduces Scott's crew, because they end up being a huge part of the story's personality. One of them tells stories in these long, rambling, secondhand ways, passing along information through a chain of unreliable sources, and it becomes a running device the film keeps coming back to for both laughs and plot information. This same crew member is the one who tips Scott off about the house they're planning to hit, describing it as belonging to some retired rich guy with barely any security. It sounds like an easy score. Nobody in the crew has any idea just how wrong that assumption is about to turn out to be. The crew breaks into the house, expecting a simple smash and grab. Instead, Scott finds a heavy old safe hidden away, and inside it, nothing valuable in the traditional sense, just a strange, outdated-looking suit. Confused but curious, he takes it anyway. Back home, alone, Scott can't resist trying the suit on. The moment he activates it, his entire world turns upside down, literally. He shrinks down to the size of an insect in an instant, and what should feel like a superpower instead feels like a nightmare. This sequence is deliberately terrifying rather than fun. Scott has no idea what's happening to his body. A curious dog becomes a towering monster. Falling water droplets become deadly explosions. He's completely disoriented, screaming, certain he's about to die, and the film plays this almost like a horror scene tucked inside a superhero story. It turns out none of this was an accident. The homeowner is Dr. Hank Pym, the very scientist who invented the shrinking technology decades earlier. He deliberately left his house vulnerable, practically inviting a break-in, because he needed to test something. He needed to see if this particular ex-con had what it takes to become his successor. The very next day, police show up at Scott's door and arrest him for the burglary. Sitting in a cell, completely defeated, thinking he's lost his last shot at his daughter for good, Scott gets a mysterious visitor delivering a message from Hank Pym, along with the very suit, smuggled directly into his cell. Using the suit, Scott shrinks down and escapes prison entirely, making his way to Hank's house. This is the turning point where the story stops being about a desperate ex-con and starts becoming something much bigger. It's worth slowing down here for a second, because this escape sequence is where the film really shows off what makes its power set so different from every other superhero we've seen. Scott isn't strong. He isn't fast in any traditional sense. His entire survival depends on using size itself as a weapon, slipping through gaps no normal person could fit through, and that idea gets reinforced again and again throughout the story. At the house, Scott finally meets the people behind all of this. Hank isn't working alone. His daughter, Hope Van Dyne, is right there with him, and the tension between the two of them is obvious from the very first exchange. Hope believes she should be the one wearing the suit. She's trained, she's sharp, she's more than capable, and she deeply resents her father for handing this role to a total stranger instead of her. Every scene between Hank and Hope carries this quiet, simmering frustration. We slowly learn why Hank is so overprotective. Years earlier, his wife, Janet, wore a similar suit on a dangerous mission, shrinking down to disable a missile from the inside. To finish the job, she had to remove the safety regulator on her suit and shrink past any known limit, vanishing into a mysterious dimension called the quantum realm. She never came back. That loss broke something in Hank. Every controlling, overly cautious decision he's made since then traces back to that single moment. He lost the person he loved most to this technology, and he refuses to risk losing his daughter the exact same way, even if it means pushing her further from him. Hank explains the real mission. His former protege, Darren Cross, has taken control of the company Hank built and is dangerously close to finishing his own version of the shrinking suit, one designed for military use, called Yellow Jacket. Darren plans to sell it, and if that technology falls into the wrong hands, the consequences could be catastrophic. Darren isn't just an ambitious businessman here. He idolized Hank as a mentor for years and was devastated when Hank pushed him out of the company. Underneath the villainy, there's a genuine, twisted hunger for the approval Hank never gave him, and that emotional wound is driving him just as much as ambition is. Hank asks Scott to become the new Ant-Man and help steal the Yellow Jacket technology before Darren can sell it. Scott is stunned, reluctant, and completely out of his depth, but agrees, mostly because Hank promises this could finally clear his criminal record. Scott's motivation never really wavers from this point forward, and that's important to notice. He's not doing this to become a hero. He's not chasing glory or power. Every single risk he takes from here on out is measured against one simple question in his head: will this get me back to my daughter? That emotional through line is what keeps the more ridiculous, science fiction elements of the story feeling grounded. Meanwhile, we also get a clearer picture of Hope's frustration boiling over. She confronts her father directly, pointing out that she has spent years training for exactly this kind of mission, only to watch him hand the suit to a random stranger off the street instead of trusting his own daughter. Hank doesn't have a good answer for her, not one he's willing to say out loud yet. Training begins, and Hope is put in charge of turning Scott into someone capable of pulling off this heist. She is not gentle about it. Every session is physical, blunt, and laced with resentment that she's not the one wearing the suit herself. Scott also learns to communicate with ants through a helmet built into the suit, commanding different types for different jobs. Flying ants for transportation, powerful ones for heavy lifting, ones that can conduct electricity for sabotage. It sounds absurd on paper, and the film knows it, but it becomes one of the most creative tools in the story. There's a lighter side to all this too. Scott names some of the ants he works with, forming a genuine bond, especially with one flying ant who becomes his primary way of getting around undetected. It's a small detail, but it humanizes this bizarre new power in a way that keeps the story grounded. Alongside the training, we see Scott's crew from the burglary come back into play, providing intel, transportation, and comic relief, while still being fiercely loyal to Scott. Despite their chaotic energy, they genuinely believe in what he's trying to do for his daughter. To prove that Scott is ready for the real mission, Hank sends him to steal a piece of equipment from the Avengers' new headquarters. What should be a simple retrieval turns into a tense standoff with Sam Wilson, the Falcon, who isn't about to let some unknown intruder walk out with Avengers property. The confrontation is fast, clever, and surprisingly even. Scott, tiny and nearly invisible, manages to outmaneuver a genuine Avenger using nothing but agility and quick thinking. It's a small-scale fight, but it's a defining moment, proving to both Scott and the audience that this unlikely hero can hang with the big leagues. Scott returns from that encounter practically buzzing with disbelief at what he just pulled off, and it's a genuinely fun beat in the story, watching this guy who spent the whole movie doubting himself finally start to believe he might actually be capable of this. Hank and Hope are impressed too, though neither of them says it outright. Around this same point, we also see glimpses of Scott's fractured home life continuing in the background. He shows up to his daughter's birthday party in the Ant-Man suit at one point, using it to entertain her, a small, sweet moment that reminds us exactly why he's putting himself through all of this danger in the first place. With training complete, the team sets their plan in motion, breaking into Darren's heavily guarded facility to steal the Yellow Jacket suit before it can be sold to dangerous buyers. The film fully commits to its heist movie identity here, careful planning, tight timing, and things immediately starting to unravel. Scott infiltrates the building using every trick he's learned, shrinking through tiny gaps, riding ants through ventilation systems, and disabling security from the inside. For a while, the plan works almost perfectly, and there's real tension in watching each piece fall into place. Then it collapses. Scott gets caught, and Darren, now fully aware of who has been sabotaging his work, confronts Hank directly. In a burst of rage fueled by years of resentment, Darren shoots Hank, wounding him seriously. The stakes shift instantly. This is no longer a clean theft. It's survival. Hope and Scott have to fight their way out, using shrinking and growing objects around them as improvised weapons while chaos erupts through the entire facility. In the middle of the escape, Scott discovers Darren has already finished his own Yellow Jacket suit and intends to use it, not just to sell the technology, but to eliminate anyone who stands in his way, starting with the people who just tried to stop him. Outside the building, Scott's ex-wife's new husband, a police officer, is caught in the middle of the chaos as Scott's crew creates diversions to help everyone escape. It's a frantic, almost comedic stretch of the film, cars getting stolen, distractions thrown left and right, all while the real danger is still unfolding inside. Wounded and desperate, Hank insists the mission still isn't over. Darren has to be stopped before he can sell or weaponize the suit, and with Hank now injured, the responsibility shifts almost entirely onto Scott and Hope to finish what they started. Darren escapes with the completed Yellow Jacket suit, and his plan turns deeply personal. Learning about Scott's daughter, he decides to go after her directly, as punishment for Scott's interference. In an instant, this stops being a mission about stolen technology and becomes a fight for a child's life. Scott races to his ex-wife's house, arriving just as Darren does. The final confrontation unfolds inside his own daughter's bedroom, and the film makes an incredibly clever choice here, shrinking the action down to the scale of a toy train set, turning something completely mundane into a genuine battlefield. The fight escalates wildly, with both men growing and shrinking mid-combat, sending furniture flying and turning a child's bedroom into a war zone without ever putting the daughter in direct physical danger from the fists themselves, though the tension never lets up for a second. To finally win, Scott makes a desperate, terrifying decision. He deliberately shrinks past every known safe limit, going subatomic, entering the same quantum realm that swallowed Hank's wife years earlier, in order to get inside Darren's suit and destroy it from within. For a moment, it genuinely looks like Scott is gone for good, lost in the same place that took Janet, with no way back. It's a quiet, haunting beat in the middle of all this chaos, forcing the audience to sit with the very real possibility that this sacrifice might be permanent. But Scott survives. Through sheer will, he claws his way back from a place no one has ever returned from before. He reappears, disoriented and shaken, but alive, and gets to hold his daughter again, the exact thing this entire journey was always about. There's something worth pointing out about how this climax is staged. So much of this movie has been about scale, about how something enormous can hide inside something tiny, and how something tiny can carry enormous weight. The final fight taking place inside a child's bedroom, on a literal toy train set, is the perfect visual summary of that entire idea. The biggest battle of Scott's life happens in the smallest, safest, most ordinary space imaginable, his daughter's room. Once the dust settles, Scott's ex-wife and her husband both witness firsthand what he actually risked to protect their daughter. It changes how they see him, shifting the tone of their relationship going forward from suspicion to something closer to trust. In the aftermath, everything has shifted. Hank finally opens up to Hope in a way he never has before, revealing that he's been secretly building her a suit of her own, the Wasp, honoring the legacy of the wife they both lost. After years of being told to sit on the sidelines, Hope is finally about to step into the role she always deserved. Scott, the man who started this story locked out of his daughter's life entirely, walks back into it not as an ex-con, but as someone who has now proven, in the most literal way imaginable, that he'd shrink himself down to nothing to protect the people he loves. Underneath all the ants, the lasers, and the shrinking suits, that's really what this whole movie is about. Second chances. Fathers trying to fix what they broke. And proving that your worth was never about your size in the first place. It's also worth noting how this story quietly sets up something bigger. Hope stepping into the wasp suit isn't just a nice character beat, it's a promise that this world is about to expand well beyond one man in a shrinking suit. And Hank's throwaway mention of what else this technology could unlock, hints that the quantum realm Scott barely escaped from is far from finished being explored. For a movie that spends most of its runtime being funny, warm, and small-scale compared to other superhero films, Ant-Man ends up saying something surprisingly universal. Being overlooked, underestimated, or written off doesn't mean you don't matter. Sometimes the smallest person in the room turns out to be exactly who everyone needed all along. So here's what I want to know from you. If you had the power to shrink down to the size of an ant for one day, what's the first thing you'd do with it? Drop your answer in the comments, I genuinely want to see the most creative ones. And if you enjoyed this recap, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because there's a whole universe of these stories still waiting to be broken down, and you do not want to miss what's coming next.